So at one point, I'll record it.
Oh, yeah, I gotta do that too.
Senator, will please come to order. Thank you for your patience. For this morning's devotionals, we'll have a moment of silence. Thank you. Please rise if you're able for our pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We now have the election of the third member of Committee on Committees process. So the next order of business is the election of a senator to serve with the president and the president pro tempore in appointing the committee of the Senate. Nominations for that office are now in order. The senator would like to recognize, chair would like to recognize the senator from Washington District, Senator Pershing.
Thank you, Mr. President. Of my fellow senators, I would like to nominate for the position of third member, Senator Jane Kitchell. In thinking about the position and what the qualities that we would want in a third member, I thought the best analogy is somebody that is a very good gardener, a master gardener. And I thought of that because a good gardener is somebody that watches how things grow, watches how to get the most out of their garden, most productive, most effectively. And I think that is also what we want in the third member. How do we work to get the most out of what the work that we do? How do we do it effectively? And if you've ever been to Senator Kitchell's house, you'll see she has a garden, and it's one of those gardens that has a line between a garden and a farm. It's a very large productive garden. And I think if you also look at Senator Kitchell's career in the Senate, also in your time from starting from an entry-level case manager up to Secretary of Agency of Human Services, her 20 years in the Senate, she is somebody that has been observant and active, elbow deep in the activity of our Senate work, and has been very observant and seen what works well and what doesn't work, how we can grow things better, how we can produce better legislation. And that is why I really want to encourage us to nominate her as third member. There's a quote that I saw the other day that I thought was another good example of Senator Kitchell's qualities, and was that she's a great woman of great accomplishments who has never achieved great arrogance. Yes, that's the question. And with that, that's my nomination. Thank you, Mr. President.
Now, the senator from Washington District has placed the name of, and I did check about how I should go about this, the name of Martha Jane Kitchell, the senator from Caledonia District, in nomination for the office of third member on the Committee on Committees. Is there a second to the nomination? The chair would like to recognize the senator from Windsor District.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is with great pleasure that I second the nomination of my legislative classmate, Senator Jane Kitchell, for the third member position. We came in together, but she was already so ahead of me in terms of knowing how it all operated. And it was wonderful to watch her in action here in the Senate and I in the House. I think of Jane as a woman with quiet authority, almost the exact opposite of me, which is what, just a gift that I have come to appreciate so fully. Gardeners actually do prune things. Gardeners do a lot of things to direct the growth of plants, just as a great baker does the same thing to make sure she has the perfect outcome. Jane holds, as far as I can tell, almost no grudges, given that she asked me to nominate her. And I think, that quiet authority and that gift of carrying no baggage, because all of us, bring a lot of baggage to these roles. I am in gratitude for her service, and I think we would all benefit enormously by having the first woman serve as the third member of the Committee on Committees. And with that, I would hope you all cast your votes to elect Jane Kitchell as our third member. Thank you.
Now, the motion has been made and seconded that Martha Jane Kitchell, the senator from Caledonia District, be elected as a third member of the Committee on Committees. Are there any other nominations for this office? There being no other nominations, the chair will entertain a motion the nominations be closed and that the secretary cast one ballot for the nominee, senator from Chittenden Central. Now,
That was my motion, Mr. President, and I second your expression.
well, I could only entertain the motion. You had to make the motion. So thank you for making the motion. The senator from Chittenden Central District has moved that the nominations be closed and that the secretary cast one ballot for Martha Jane Kitchell as the third member of the Committee on Committees. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying no. The ayes have it. And Martha Jane Kitchell, the senator from Caledonia District, is declared elected to the office of third member of the Committee on Committees for the remainder of the biennium. With that, will the senator from Caledonia District please present yourself at the bar of the Senate to receive the oath of office? John, you do that. Come on up. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Martha Jane Kitchell, solemnly swear
I, Martha Jane Kitchell, solemnly swear
that I will be true and faithful to the state of Vermont,
that I will be true and faithful to the state of Vermont,
and that I will not directly or indirectly
and I will not directly or indirectly
do any act or thing injurious to the Constitution or government thereof,
do anything injurious to the act or injurious to the act or injurious to the constant or government thereof.
so help me God.
So help me God.
I solemnly swear
I solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of third member of the Committee on Committees of the Senate
that I will faithfully execute the committee of the third member of the Committee on Committees of the Senate
for the state of Vermont,
for the state of Vermont,
and will therein do equal right and justice to all men and women,
and therein will do equal right and justice to all men and women,
to the best of my judgment and ability,
to the best of my judgment and ability,
according to the law,
according to the law.
so help me God.
So help me God.
I solemnly swear
I solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the state of Vermont
that I will support the Constitution of the state of Vermont
and the Constitution of the United States,
and the Constitution of the United States.
so help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations. I will add that she also has a good firm handshake of a farmer as well. Are there any announcements? Senator from Chittenden Central.
Yes, Mr. President, I would move that Senate Rule 31 be suspended and that H 883, an act relating to making appropriations for the support of government, not be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Now, the senator from Chittenden Central has moved that Senate Rule 31 be suspended and that H 883, an act relating to making appropriations for the support of government, not be referred to the Committee on Finance. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you've suspended your rules in order that H 883 not be referred under Rule 31 to the Committee on Finance. We now have a few bills to refer. The first being H10. H10 affecting the revenue of the state will be referred to the Committee on Finance. H72 affecting the expenditures of the state will be referred to the Committee on Appropriations. H707 affecting the expenditures of the state will be referred to the Committee on Appropriations. And H847 affecting the expenditures of the state will be referred to the Committee on Appropriations. We now have a joint resolution for adoption and act, or to be read and adopted. Please listen to the reading of the resolution.
Resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives that when the two houses adjourn on Friday, April 26, 2024, it be to meet again no later than Tuesday, April 30, 2024.
Now you've heard the reading of the resolution. The question is, shall the Senate adopt the resolution? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have adopted JRS 54. We now have a bill for reference, H 626. H 626 is an act relating to animal welfare. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
H 626, an act relating to animal welfare.
Now you've heard the first reading of the bill. The bill having not reached the body by crossover will be referred to Committee on Rules. That brings us to the orders of the day. We are passing over S25, as I understand it, which means our first order of business is H 868. H 868 was read for the first time, referred to Committee on Transportation, which considers the same and recommends that when the bill is amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill is then referred to Committee on Finance, which considers the same and recommends the same, as well as the Committee on Appropriation. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H 868, an act relating to fiscal year 2025 transportation program and miscellaneous changes to laws related to transportation.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill for the report of the Committee on Transportation, the Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, I am presenting the 2024 transportation bill as passed by the House as a strike-all amendment from your Senate Transportation Committee. I will be presenting together with Senator from Chittenden Southeast and the Senator from Essex. All right, so I'll go right into the section by section. Section 1 is the adoption of the transportation program. I brought on this non-prop, this example of what is the program. So this, if we had put in the whole program, it would have to include this entire book. This is all the programs or projects that the Agency of Transportation is planning on doing. It has other information here, past expenses, future projections of projects, but basically any transportation project plan for this fiscal year is in this book. So this first section basically references the program, which is all the paving, all the bridges, all those projects. And there's some revisions and new definitions and things like that. So that's section 1. Section 2, we on Transportation Committee like to refer to this as the Senator Ash section. When he was on Senate Transportation, it was his idea to add this section in, which isn't any new legislation, but it's all the parts of the transportation bill that have anything to do with climate, carbon reductions or environmental benefits or reductions of fossil fuel use, all in one section. Because before you had to kind of flip through the entire book or try to figure out what we were saying in different sections to find these things. So in the section 2A or section 2, you can find things like that we're spending $11 million for bike and pedestrian facilities, $54 million for public transit, $48 million for intercity passenger rail and for rail infrastructure that supports freight, $4.8 million for electric vehicle supply equipment, things like that. 2A is a new section that we haven't had in the transportation bill before, and this reiterates that the state energy plan, which is created by Buildings and General Services and other agencies of state government to support the plan, requires or has a goal of reaching 35% of the thermal energy needs from non-fossil fuel sources by 25 and 45% by 2035. The agency was working on this, but it wasn't in session law anywhere. So we added that in, also directs AOT to prioritize high efficient renewable heating. The AOT is the second largest of buildings next to Buildings and General Services. They have a lot of buildings. So I thought this was important just to highlight that this requirement, and requires them to report. We found out that last state energy plan done by BGS didn't have updated information from the Agency of Transportation. So the language in here just reminds them to make sure that they're updating buildings and general services on their thermal energy use in all the buildings that they have. Section 3, this carried over from the House. This reduces the maintenance program by 1.86 million. And the maintenance program, you can think of anything to maintain the highways as far as paving, salt, sand, all those kind of things, mowing. That's the maintenance program. It's a large part of the AOT budget. It is $65 million in non-personnel costs, 48 million personnel costs. And it's one part of the agency's operational budget that's almost entirely state funding, like 98% state funding. There's a lot of federal money in the agency budget, as you might guess, but this is the section that's all state funds. So when we're trying to find money for other projects, the maintenance budget is often where we go. So this takes 1.86 million out of the maintenance budget for next year and directs it to 2 other programs. The first one is the Town Highway Aid Program. This is the program based on the number of miles each town or municipality has. By formula, sends that money out to the town so they can help maintain their roads that we all might use as we go through those towns. The formula had gotten messed up a little bit, so this corrects the formula to keep it kind of where it should be. It adds $860,000 statewide. So town by town, it doesn't add a lot, but it kind of gets the base back up where it should be. So to find out, so that's the 860 of the $1,860,000 that we took out of the maintenance budget. We put the 860 into the Town Highway Aid Program. And to find out what the $1 million went to, I'm going to yield to the senator from Essex.
Senator from Washington yields to Senator from Essex.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm tasked with happily reporting sections 5 through 10. Sections 5 is a one-time public transit monies for Green Mountain Transit. It also covers fare collections, evaluations, and reorganization, and then tasks them with some reports. This section authorizes one-time spending of $1 million for a grant to Green Mountain Transit as bridge funding for FY 2025, while GMT stabilizes its finances, adjusts its service levels, and transitions to a sustainable funding model, imposes conditions on grant funding, including restarting fare collections for urban and commuter transit, evaluating alternative service options, and reporting to House and Senate Transportation Committees in November 24 and February 25. Section 6 covers AOT duties, including bonding. This section amends 19 VSA Section 10 by permitting the secretary to waive the requirements of a surety bond if a contract for construction of a transportation improvement is for $100,000 or less, and makes other changes to improve readability. Section 7, delays and increased estimated costs and technical corrections for projects that are included in the 10G report. This section amends 19 VSA Section 10G regarding which projects must be included in the update found in the agency's annual proposed transportation program to include projects for which total estimates of costs have increased by more than $5 million or 75% from the estimate in the adopted transportation program for prior fiscal year, changed from 8 million and 100%. It also affects projects for which total estimate costs have for the first time increased by more than $10 million or 100% from the preliminary plan estimates. The section provides clarity regarding reallocations of funds when projects are delayed, or if additional funding is needed to maintain the schedule in the approval transportation program for the current fiscal year. This section also adds headings to each subsection and makes other technical and non-substantive changes. Sections 8 and 9, it's appropriation calculations for central garage fund and town highway aid. This section clarifies the methodology for performing inflationary calculations for transfers to the central garage fund and appropriations for town highway and that aid that is 19 VSA section 306 subsection A. Number 10 is a right-of-way permit fee waiver section. This section amends 19 VSA section 1112, which establishes fees for some permits issued under 19 VSA section 1111 for use of a state or town highway right-of-way. Specifically, the section adds a new subdivision subsection C, to permit the secretary to waive collections of the permit fee for minor commercial development if the governor has declared a state of emergency and the secretary has determined that the applicant is facing hardship. The applicant would be required to apply for the waiver during or within 6 months after the end of the state of emergency. That, Mr. President, leads me to section 11, which I would like to yield from the senator from Washington, please.
Yield to the senator from Washington or yield? Okay.
Senator
Senator,
from Washington.
Senator from Essex yields to the senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. So that brings us to page 2660, if you're following today's calendar, is section 11. This is changes to the Replace Your Ride program. This is a program that allows Vermonters to trade in older, low efficient vehicles for a new electric vehicle or high mileage hybrid. And this eases the requirement because we required it to be registered. We want working vehicles. This is a program to take working inefficient vehicles off the road. And the prior eligibility, you had to have it registered and inspected with 1 year, but some people, they were thinking about whether they wanted to pay to get it fixed so they could pass inspection, they get it over a little bit over a year, and then they wouldn't be eligible. So this changes it from 12 months to 18 months to have your car registered, inspected, and still be eligible to have that vehicle eligible to be replaced in the program and get the incentive. Section 12 also is a flexibility change for the Replace Your Ride program. This was put in by the House. We agreed to, it came out of the floods. So a lot of people had their cars damaged by the floods. They were totaled. So this is just, and the agency was able to work with that during this last flood, but this gives them more flexibility during emergencies to be able to allow those vehicles into the program. Section 13 is the Electrify Your Fleet program. This is part of our electric vehicle incentive program. We have a special program for fleets. And, businesses, anybody that has a fleet of vehicles can have special incentives. Before, the incentive was just a flat $2,500. And this changes it to 25% or $22,500, depending, whatever's lower. So the reason we did this, because a vehicle isn't going to be that low, but it's going to help for the electric bikes that some fleets to buy. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't over incentivizing electric bikes. This also provides for a higher price for electric bikes. Some of the cargo bikes that like a town or a ski area or somebody might want to have electric bike, that we had a $6,000 cap. We raised it up to $10,000. Some of these electric bikes were getting up into that higher price range, still limited to the 2,500 or 25%. And we also added ATVs to the list. There's now some electric ATVs available on the market. We wanted, if there's people that wanted to buy those, to be eligible in the program. Section 14 is eligibility about e-bikes, but it's really about the report that the agency does on e-bikes incentives. Just basically expands the reporting requirement that the agency is giving on e-bike incentives. Section 15 is the vehicle incentive program, also about annual reporting. This requires that the report also address the effectiveness of the marketing. How well are they doing at getting the word out to Vermonters about these incentives? We wanted to have that in the annual report. Section 16 is the authority to transfer money. So we have three main programs. We have the new vehicle EV incentive. We have that Replace Your Ride, where you get rid of kind of a cash for clunkers type program, where you get rid of an old car, get a much more efficient car. And then we have the fleet program. This allows, and we have the Mileage Smart program, which is targeted for low income folks. That doesn't have to be an EV, it can just be a high mileage gas vehicle. It's about getting them into efficient vehicles, saving them money on their gas, and as well reducing emissions. This section 16 gives the agency authority to move money amongst those three programs. If one of them is about to run out of money and there's money in the other program, they can move the money around so that a really successful program doesn't run out of money while some other money is just sitting in a program. So that's section 16. To take you through Next part of the T-bill, I'm going to yield to the senator from Chittenden Southeast.
The senator from Washington yields to Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Mr. President, I'll be walking through section 17 through 26, and if you're following along on page 2663. So section 17 has to do with electrical vehicle supply equipment. This section adds new language addressing electric vehicle supply equipment, including a new state goal, not mandate, of having a publicly available level 3. Level 3 is the fast chargers, EVSE charging ports within 3 driving miles of every exit of Interstate 89, 91, and 93. Again, a goal. It also has a goal of within 25 miles of each level 3 charging port, and also a goal of co-locating with or within safe and walkable, rollable distance of publicly accessible amenities. It also adds a new section 2907 that requires the agency to file an annual report with a map regarding the state's effort to meet federally required electrical vehicle infrastructure deployment plans, and an annual report regarding the current operability of publicly available EVSE charging stations that were deployed with the assistance of agency funding. Section 18 really is some cleanup language from some session law for the previous section, which we are now putting into statute, as well as some other areas. Section 19 has to do with the beneficial electrification report, electric distribution utilities. This section requires the Public Utility Commission to include information regarding service upgrade practices related to electrical vehicle supply equipment installation across all electric distribution utilities, including a comparison of EVSE related service upgrade practices and a description of the frequency and typical costs of these service upgrades, and ratepayer impact and ratepayer impact on a report that is already due January 15th, 2025 per the 2021 session law. So not an additional report, just a change to an existing one that's coming to us. Next, we're going to talk about the next block, which is to do with expansion of public transportation service. So section 20 has to do with mobility services guides. This is a section that adds session law requiring the agency, in consultation with others, to develop a web-based guide outlining the different mobility service models that the state could consider for deployment. This section specifies certain minimum elements to be included in the guide, and the agency is to give that report by February 15th, 2025, with the presentation of a web-based guide on the matter. Section 21, still in the public transit area, Mobility and Transportation Innovations, MTI grant program. This section establishes the MTI grant in statute. So again, pulling it from session law. The program will support innovative transportation demand management programs and transit initiatives that improve mobility and access to services for transit-dependent Vermonters. It reduces the use of single occupancy vehicles, reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and complements existing mobility investments. It also allows for grants of up to $100,000 per recipient for capital and/or operational costs, for matching funds for other grants, for program delivery costs, or to extend existing programs, but not to supplant existing state funding for the same project or program. AOT's grant also does AOT's grant application period must be at least 4 months, and grant awards must be distributed by November 30th each year they are offered. Section 22, the Vermont Rail Plan, Amtrak. This section adds session law that as part of the agency's new Vermont Rail Plan, it requires the agency, so again, adding to an existing rail plan that's being formulated, requires the agency to consider and address adding additional daily service on the Vermonter and expanding service on the Valley Flyer. The agency is also required to consult with others regarding bicycle storage and trains serving those routes. The agency must provide the report by February 15, 2025. We're on to section 23, replacement of Vermont state design standards. This is really more clarity on the engagement process around state design standards. This section requires the agency to release a draft of the replacement for the Vermont design standards by January 1st, 2026, conduct at least 4 public hearings across the state, provide a publicly available summary of engagement activities and public responses to the final draft of the replacement. Also requires them to consult key stakeholders and provide oral updates to the House and Senate Transportation Committees by this coming February 15th. And the following year when it's due in 2026. Now we're on to section 24, complete streets, traffic calming measures, and designated centers. So this section amends a current state policy that grants that the agency, that agency projects will increase and encourage pedestrian, bicycle, and public transit use of public streets. The amendments to 2402 supports and expands understanding of the complete streets principle that when desired by a municipality, they would include designing streets to calm and slow traffic in state designated centers, further strengthening the bond between the agency and the municipalities. And also support land uses that develop and evolve in tandem with transit and accessibility. Section 25, which I would refer you to more clarity than what I'm going to offer in this report here, because it is not a dense section, but a lot of content, and that's on page 2670, really comes down to the TCI initiative that was voted by the Vermont Climate Council to join, which didn't happen. It became unviable. So this is really picking up from where that left off and charging a multi-stakeholder group, including the treasurer, to really look at 4 different scenarios for transportation emissions reductions and strategies around it. Section A of this is findings to support that section. Section B requires the Agency of Transportation and of Natural Resources in consultation with other named entities to prepare a written analysis of policy and investment scenarios to reduce transportation-related emissions and meet state greenhouse gas reduction standards. Section C, subsection C, identifies the minimum analysis required, including the pros, cons, costs, and benefits to the state to participating in a regional cap and investment program, adopting a clean transportation fuel standard, or implementing other potential revenue-raising carbon pollution reduction strategies. Subsection D requires the written analysis to include an estimate of the amount of emissions reduction from a minimum of 4 scenarios and a summary of how each analyzed proposal would be administered. Subsection E requires the state treasurer, and we checked with him, he was on board, to review the written analysis and make written recommendations to the General Assembly. Section F requires maintenance of publicly accessible website regarding the development of written analysis and the filing of status updates with key legislative committees by November 15th of this year. It also requires the agency's written analysis and the treasurer's recommendations to be filed with the legislative committees by February 15th of next year. The last 2 sections require the agencies to retain a consultant who is an expert in comprehensive transportation policy with a focus on emissions reductions and economic modeling. And section H enables funds received under the EPA's climate pollution reduction grants to pay for the consultant if such costs are eligible. And it authorizes the treasurer to use funds appropriated in fiscal year 2025. The last section I'll be reporting before I turn the floor back over to the senator from Washington is section 26, having to do with the Better Connections Grant Program. This section creates in Title 19, a section to codify the Better Connections Grant Program, an existing program that provides planning grants to municipalities to coordinate municipal land use decisions with transportation investments. With that, Mr. President, I'd like to yield to the senator from Washington.
Senator from Chittenden Southeast yields to the senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'll finish out the rest of the sections. This is on up to section 27 through 29. This is on page 2673. Like a good parent, don't pick favorites, but I think this section is kind of the most interesting section, let's say, where the most policy questions might arise. So sections 27 through 29 in today's calendar refer to this road usage surcharge. We're going to have an amendment later changing that name. As we started this, we talked about the fact that owners of electric vehicles do not have to pay any gas tax because they're not purchasing any gas. And there was a concern about the health of our transportation fund and the funds that we have to maintain our roads and bridges effectively as all vehicles just become more efficient that are buying less gas, but also EVs and plug-in hybrids that could maybe never buy gas. So a lot of states have looked at in this and created a road usage fee for those that use the roads but don't pay gas tax. And it ranges across the state from as low as like $25 to $50 up to New Jersey, just past one that's $1,000. Other states have like $250. So that's what we've started to look at about transitioning to the owners of electric vehicle to help maintain our roads. The Agency of Transportation has been working on for a couple of years now a transition to a miles-based usage fee or MBUF that would charge you based on how many miles you drive in your vehicle. If you drive more miles on the roads, you should pay more, just kind of you do now with the gas tax. So it's to mirror the gas tax. It would be based on your odometer reading when you go get your vehicle inspected, and then you would be charged the fee. That's going to take some years to roll out. They're applying for a grant from the federal government to help do this. They're just now applying for the grant this year. It's going to take a couple of years to have that going. We're not sure that they'll get the grant, how that all goes. So instead of just waiting for another couple of years to collect money from EV drivers, we started looking at how we would impose a fee this year or coming fiscal year. So we studied it, and what we came up with was this fee that was actually based on the recommendations in the agency's report on moving to a miles-based user fee. And that would be $89, basically the same that you pay for your registration. So if you have an EV and you go to register, you pay your $89 registration fee and an $89 fee for the usage of the roads. However, you'll see in this amendment, we're going to change the name to the EV infrastructure fee, because we decided in conversations with different witnesses we had and advocates for moving to an electric fleet that one of the main issues about trying to get more electric vehicles on the road is the lack of charging stations. Also in the House bill, they had put in $1.7 million for electric vehicle charging that wasn't going to be on our main corridors. We have a lot of federal money for putting electric charging stations along our interstate, on the exits, and along the kind of principal travel corridors, but we don't have a lot of money for charging at multifamily housing or at workplace charging. We had taken that 1.7 million at the House and changed it around, moved it to some other things. So we wanted to refund that because we agreed with the House that there is a need for this other vehicle charging funds. So the money that this $89 for an EV, if you have a plug-in hybrid, be half of that, so $44.50 per year, would go towards electric vehicle charging stations. So that's why we changed the name from a road usage fee. The money isn't going to go to the transportation fund. It's going to go to the electric vehicle charging stations so that we can get more electric vehicles. And then when we move to the miles-based usage fee, those vehicles will be paying based on the miles used. But we wanted to get that going. It's going to raise estimated, look at the fiscal note, $900,000 in fiscal year 25, because it won't start till halfway through the fiscal year, and 1.7 million in fiscal year 26, which is the dollar amount that the other body had put forward for charging stations in multifamily units and working with workplace charging. So that's the sections on the EV infrastructure fee. It also has some reporting. It requires them to do outreach campaign so people are ready for this. Because if you have an EV, you haven't been paying any fee. So this would be a new fee. So we want to make sure people are not surprised by it. And then section 29 sunsets that charge if and when the MBUF, the mileage-based usage fee, starts, so that you're not paying both. You would switch to the new mileage-based fee. Section 30 is the central garage. If you ever drive along the Barry Montpelier Road, before you kind of get to the main shopping area of that road, before you get to Barry, is where the Agency of Transportation central garage was. It was a big area of all the plow trucks. It's where they do the auctions. They do a lot of the repairs there. That was severely flooded in July. A lot of vehicles damaged, roads damaged, the buildings damaged. And it was not deemed wise to move the central garage back into that location. So we are without a central garage location at the moment. The agency has looked around the state for new locations for the central garage, found a site in Berlin, closer to the interstate, not in the floodplain. And so section 30 allows them to spend up to $2 million to purchase that property. And then there would be a whole other process to build the building at that site, if they were able to purchase it. Section 31 deals with railroad leases. There was some kind of antiquated language about the requirement of the state to lease railroads to railroad companies. there's some federal law that kind of superseded some of these things. So we just basically, I would say, modernizing the requirements when the state is agreeing or leasing for a railroad. It came up because this railroad that goes from Montpelier and Barry, the lease has come up. These are long-term leases, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And so that lease came up. And so while we were agreeing to allow them to sign a new lease, update that lease, we cleaned up the language so that they don't need approval from the legislature to do so. Section 32 just updates the MUTCD. This is the uniform traffic control devices, the manual on uniform traffic control devices, just updating from what Vermont is using to the federal manual. This is for all deals with any signs and other things like that that you see along our roads and highways. Section 33 and 34, we went through all the reports that come to the Committee on Transportation. And we found a couple that we didn't need, that we weren't paying attention to. And so we thought we'd make it easier on folks and just repeal the requirement on 2 of these sections. So that's what section 33 and section 34 repeal some of those requirements that were not necessarily. So that takes us to section 35, the effective dates. Section 30, which is the central garage authority to purchase the property, and the railroad leases, those are time sensitive, so those take effect upon passage. The electric vehicle road usage, or the electric vehicle infrastructure fee, takes effect on passage. And section 29 takes effect upon which is the sunset, that doesn't take effect until the mileage-based user fee goes into effect. Now, everything else takes effect on July 1st of 2024. So those are the sections. Happy to answer questions about all those. We heard from 23 or 4 witnesses here. I mean, 8 of them were from the Agency of Transportation, so I won't read you all those, but we also heard from groups like Capstone that are working on transportation initiatives, groups like Sierra Club and Local Motion that are working on bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure policy, Ledge Council, the reporter from the bill from the House, Joint Fiscal Office, the Public Utilities Commission, the Office of the State Treasurer related to the report that Senator from Chittenden Southeast was reporting on, the University of Vermont Transportation Research Center, the Agency of Agriculture, which we don't normally have in transportation, but they also do the weights and measures. We're talking about when we have electric vehicle charging stations, they need to be regulated just as we regulate gas pumps. So when you pump your gas, you know you're getting a gallon because Weights and Measures has verified that that's an accurate pump. We need to do the same for our electric vehicle charging stations. So when you get a kilowatt hour of electricity, that wasn't really a kilowatt hour that you were charged for. So they're just setting up that whole program at Weights and Measures. So we heard from them. I think that basically covers the gist of who we heard from as far as witnesses go. And the vote of committee was 4-0-0, or maybe it was 4-0-1, can't remember, depending on the timing of when we had the vote. And with that, I encourage questions and support for this Senate Transportation Committee's report. Thank you.
Bill is then referred to Committee on Finance, which considered the same and recommended that when the amended bill ought to pass for the report of the Committee on Finance Center from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this bill has really 2 sections that affect the revenues of the state. Section 10 really just adjusts, allows the governor to waive a $250 application fee for right-of-way access permits when it happens within 6 months of a declared emergency or during a time of emergency. So again, that had a de minimis effect on revenues. And the other one, the senator from Washington very eloquently spoke to, having to do with the EV and the BEV and PHEV fees. So BEV being battery electric vehicles will get the $89 per year charge. The plug-in hybrid electric vehicle will be half of that. Again, those are set to sunset, but during the interim, that is expected to raise, I believe the senator from Washington stated, about $912,000 this coming fiscal year and $1.7 million in fiscal year 26. Your Senate Finance Committee voted 7-0-0 and to move this bill favorably.
Bills then referred to Committee on Appropriations are considered the same and with further amendment recommends the bill ought to pass for the report of Committee on Appropriations, Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Appropriation has 4 instances of amendment. These are not really appropriation amendments, but they were amendments that came, or issues that came to the Senate Transportation Committee after it had left our committee. And since 2 of us on transportation are also on appropriations, we thought we would just make the amendments in our report from appropriations. So the first instance of amendment is dealing with state policy around complete streets. This was brought to us by regional planning commissions. Complete Streets is the program that encourages by the state policy that when we're doing any road projects, that we're maximizing the efforts to make those road projects supportive and safe for pedestrian, bicycles, public transit, promoting intermodal access to our road and transportation infrastructure. That's what Complete Streets about. Both it's a policy both for state projects and municipal projects. So we added in this amendment a 4th requirement, and that is that when you're working on a project, not only are you trying to serve all kind of modes of transportation where you can, but if there's municipalities that have specifically identified in their regional plan to implement street design for purposes of calming or slowing traffic in state designated centers, that be considered. And that was something that wasn't in there before. So that further on this first instance of amendment on that issue of just making sure that these municipal or regional concerns are addressed. There's a process. If you can't implement this Complete Streets principles in your project, you have to write a written determination. And this made it clear that if you don't include those municipal requirements or desires, that you have to explain why. And then that's repeated for the municipal project. They also have to do this supplemental written determination, shall address these design elements that were desired by the municipality or specifically identified in their plans. So that's the first instance of amendment, is bringing in the regional desires and plans, municipal desires and plans for complete street design. Our second instance of amendment is the changing of that name of from electric vehicle road usage fee to electric vehicle infrastructure fee, because we're going to use the money for electric vehicle infrastructure, not for the road infrastructure, until we move to the MBUF program when it's going to be based on miles traveled. So there's several sections and a lot of language in here, but all of it is about changing the name to the EV infrastructure fee. So we're just kind of repeating sections so we can make sure we get the naming correct. There's also a sunset. The name is changed in the sunset. This is all just about changing the name. That's that. The third instance of amendment is a technical correction that was brought to us by Ledge Council. When we're eliminating some of those reports, we eliminated a report that was in 7K, but then later on, we included 7K. So this third instance just strikes out 7K because we had eliminated that report. The fourth and final instance of amendment is about the Mileage Smart program. The Mileage Smart program is kind of one of our most successful EV programs that we have going on, or efficient vehicles, because it's not just EVs, it could be a high mileage, it could be like a Prius. If you're going from a truck that got 15 miles to the gallon to a Prius that's getting 45 miles a gallon, you're not only saving a lot of gas, but saving a lot of money. This program has seen a lot of uptick since the change of the year, because the federal government now allows the tax credit on used vehicles. And for other reasons, the used dealers are starting to understand the program, so they're buying these vehicles and making sure they have them on the lots and encouraging their customers to use them. So the money is going so fast, we wanted to give the agency some flexibility in the eligibility. Right now, you could be eligible for this program if you're below 80% of the state median income. They were thinking about lowering it, but when we wrote the program into law, we said 80%. So if they wanted to change it to 70% or 60% to slow the money down and really focus the money on the lowest income Vermonters, those most in need of getting a high efficient vehicle, they couldn't do it. So this change just allows that flexibility to lower the eligibility to less income Vermonters. So that is the amendment from your Senate Appropriations Committee. We voted that out favorably 6-0-1.
So the question is, shall the report of the Committee on Transportation be amended as offered by the Committee on Appropriations? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it. You have amended the report of the Committee on Transportation as offered by the Committee on Appropriations. The question now is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Transportation as amended? Are you ready for that question? Senator from Windsor.
I'm not sure what section I'm asking to interrogate on because it's a removal of a section. I believe I would like to interrogate the senator from Essex County on section 6, which is not in the bill, but he did section 6.
So the senator from Essex is interrogated, we believe, is the report of the section.
Point of order.
Point of order, Senator from Washington.
Questions on the finance report. I didn't know if we should wait for the interrogation to the.
Actually, your point of order is not well taken. There is no need to, there is no vote on the finance report because there's no amendment from the Finance Committee.
Okay, thank you.
Senator from Essex is interrogated as the reporter of the section of the bill, we believe.
Section 6, as it was passed on the House side, was the e-bike money to fund of $140,000 towards the program that has been widely successful to support incentives for Vermonters who are transitioning from ideally a vehicle, a gas vehicle, to using an electric bike. I'm confused about if that money was fully struck out of the transportation budget and where it went. And you covered section 6, which is what it was on the House side. It's, I believe, no longer in the bill. I'm wondering if you could describe what happened and where that money is, if we're closing down the e-bike program, or if it's maybe in a different section that I don't understand.
Well, Mr. President, we did strike out 140,000. We just really thought that the e-bike program was very well funded and very much on its way, and so we came to 140,000. I don't believe that it's anywhere else in the bill, but I could take a brief recess and check with the chair, but I don't believe it's anywhere else in the bill. I think that we just felt that the e-bike program was well on its way, and that the $140,000 could be used elsewhere more effectively.
Are we taking it?
Are you requesting a recess?
I don't believe that we put the money back in anywhere else.
So
Would you like a recess to confirm that, or are you good?
I'm fine with that. Yeah, we didn't put the 140,000. We struck the 140,000 from the bill because we think the e-bike program is doing very well the way it stands right now, and we could use $140,000 better elsewhere within the bill.
okay, so my understanding from that answer is the $140,000 for the e-bike program is not in the T-bill as it stands. It's not in another section. Thank you for that clarification. What is left of the program's budget?
I can stop and we can take a recess and we can find out. And
Unless someone else, would you like to yield to the senator from
I
Washington?
will yield to the Senator
The
Washington.
senator from Essex yields to the senator from Washington.
My understanding is that the program is running out of money. I could check, or we get back to you on third reading on exactly where it is. But yeah, the other chamber did put money in there to keep the program running longer. Looking at our public transportation needs in particular, we were looking at public transportation being cut 30% of the routes from Green Mountain Transit. And so we were really concerned about that and thought that in comparison, the electric bikes is a good program. It was successful. I think we got it going, and that people are now kind of know that they're out there. So we thought that money was better spent trying to support our public transportation sector. But to answer the question of basically, yes, the program would run out if it hasn't run out already or about to run out, or with the funding that they have now. I'll get back a third reading where it is, but I'm saying it's under $100,000. It's near the end of the program. It could be at like $10,000.
I thank the speaker. I am disappointed that, as characterized by members of the Senate Transportation, a successful, well-run program that has benefited many Vermonters will be ending, is my understanding based on what I've heard now on the floor. Although I respect the decision that that money would go towards public transportation, I think unfortunately, many Vermonters in rural parts of our state don't have access to that public transportation, and e-bikes were actually their alternative. So I think we've kind of pitted, unfortunately, two important climate response solutions against each other in this decision. I also wanted to just note, while I'm disappointed by that section, and I do hope that Vermonters who are seeking an e-bike, especially since this was designed to support low-income Vermonters accessing e-bikes, I do hope that they utilize the resources like the e-bike lending libraries that have popped up throughout the state. So if Vermonters who were thinking about taking advantage of the incentive are seeing that the program is ending, there are other resources for you. I wanted to just thank the Transportation Committee for their diligent work on this bill. I presented an amendment to the committee which failed, which looked at the EV fee. And I appreciate the time that I was given to offer that amendment and will not be offering it on the floor. The three things I wanted to highlight, if members of the Climate Solutions Caucus are interested in some of the successes of this bill, I would start by saying thank you for the MTI grant program, the microtransit pilots that we've seen throughout the state. If you need a GMT ride and you've carpooled here today, you can use the MTI program to your benefit. So thank you so much for supporting that funding. It is a free, accessible, Uber-like rural Uber program. The expansion of level 2 EVSE, that's huge. We already have fights out front for electric vehicle chargers, so we're going to need more if we want to have access for the rest of Vermont. And then last, I wanted to thank the committee for their leadership on looking at a regional cap and invest model. We do not have a program to lower our transportation emissions in a substantial way. We worked extremely hard on a clean heat standard for our thermal sector. We need something for our transportation sector because it's our largest carbon emitting sector in Vermont. So I do hope that as it makes its way through the multiple agencies, that we come out with a proposal and we have support from the governor on a program that is recommended out of that. So I thank the committee and appreciate their time for working on this bill.
Question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Transportation as amended by the Committee on Appropriations? Senator from Bennington.
Mr. President, I'm always concerned when the legislature gives up some of its powers to the executive branch. I wonder if I can inquire Senator from Washington regarding section 31 on page 2675.
Senator from Washington is interrogated as a reporter.
Mr. President, this seems to be giving what was a General Assembly legislative prerogative to the administration under the Secretary of Transportation. And I don't want to list how long my career is, but in my career, there's been many battles with the railroads. And frankly, at least we had some little power. In Bennington, the most recent one is where you put cars, store railroad cars, and particularly those with flammable liquids. Many of our constituents are rightly concerned about having those right next to their homes. Yet it was very difficult, and only through a little bit of pressure, we at least got them away from the houses. So, I'm wondering if this is some kind of quick decision or just something that the agency wanted to control.
Thank you, Mr. President. This, if you see further in that on the next, well, not near that section, there's a reference to 49 CFR Part 1150. This is the federal regulation around operating railroad lines, and I would have to get you more information on third reading. But my understanding was that federal regulation basically kind of required what these leases are what were required in the leases. So our approval really didn't mean anything. Like you said, we've also had these discussions in our committee about what we can kind of make the railroad companies do, and we find out usually we can't make them do anything because we're preempted by federal law. So I can get more information on third reading, but my understanding is that this wasn't needed because there wasn't anything we could really do about it. And since the secretary works for the governor, we thought getting approval from the governor was gratuitous.
I'm a little, thank you, Mr. President. I'm a little concerned about this section. And since we're going to approve it today and get more information, is there a possible route to amend it or do something with it at third reading? Mr. President?
Is that parliamentary inquiry? I'll just
Yes.
have to pause for a moment to seek counsel. Hold on a second. To answer your question, today's vote will be sort of en masse, unless someone divides the question, but right now it's en masse. So tomorrow or the next legislative day that this is taken up, you would be able to amend any particular section of the bill as it's presented for third reading. You could either amend or move to remove any section individually.
And I look forward to working with the, I guess, still interim chair of the Transportation Committee on this particular issue. Thank you.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Transportation as amended? Are you ready for that question? Senator from Windsor.
President, can the question be divided?
In all likelihood, yes. Would you like to indicate what your
Yes,
division
I
would
would,
be?
I would ask that we vote on section 28 and 29 separately. Those are the sections pertaining to the mileage fee that essentially does away with the incentive for.
And you would like to take those as a separate block of those two sections from the rest of the
That is
motion?
my request.
And would you like those to be voted on first or second? Because to separate it, it would then say we'd be voting to do either those or everything else to the bill, and then that. to the
I
bill.
would defer on the procedure to the presiding officer.
Okay, just one moment.
If the presiding officer needs a position from me, I would say, let's do that first.
Yes, it can be divided, and it can be done either way. And so therefore, I will take your motion as to divide the question and to vote whether sections 28 and 29 of the transportation amendment as amended be adopted. And then the second vote would be the remaining sections to be adopted. I've been advised that those may or may not be the exact right sections. We want to take just a pause to make sure you've got them the way you'd like. So we're going to take a brief recess till the fall of the gavel.
I don't want to give. We're hear about this all the time at Bumpers. People have just gone.
Senator, please come to order. Senator from Windsor, would you like to restate your question?
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to actually revise my request that sections 27, 28, and 29 be voted separately.
The senator from Windsor has moved that or not moved, has requested the question be divided and that we take sections 27 as found at the bottom of page 2673, sections 28 and section 29, which continues through to the top of page 2675, be voted on separately. Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a point of inquiry. Those sections generate revenues that have been anticipated to support the EV infrastructure. And so for FY25, we anticipate a startup date maybe in October. So the estimated revenues are 900,000, and in 26, those revenues would go to 1.7, which was the amount we were looking at to support the development of and the installation of charging infrastructure in residential homes. So if in fact we did not support those, I believe then we would have to go back and adjust the appropriation in another section of the budget. So that's my question.
I'll take that more as a statement, although I will inquire as to whether the question can be divided the way it is and whether that could stand as still being an expenditure without a source. Let me inquire. So my understanding is that the other sections do not need to be included because we don't have any rule or requirement that the source of funding and the expenditure remain linked in the bill. So it would be a separate bill, and then that would be something that would have to be resolved somehow by the appropriations committees or the general body, if
Thank
this
you.
were a successful.
Mr. President, I guess then in my statement, I'm just making the body aware that there are implications as it relates to how those revenues are used to support our continued electrification of our vehicles in Vermont, and where that money would be directed. And so it would have an impact on what we have for our strategies to reduce carbon emissions in this sector of, as I say, 900,000 in 25 and 1.7 in the subsequent fiscal year. Thank you.
Senator from Windsor.
I need some guidance on procedure. Would this be the appropriate time for me to explain why?
The question right now is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Transportation as amended in sections 27, 28, and 29?
I would explain my thinking on this matter. 30 years ago, global warming was a controversy. And there were people who, in fact, the vocabulary is interesting. I can remember when people used to speak of believing in global warming or not believing in global warming. Not believing in global warming has now become crazy uncle stuff. The serious debate is based on a fairly universal understanding of the science and a respect for the science on global warming. But I'm not sure that there is a universal consensus on the gravitas of that issue. It is treated often as a lifestyle choice. some people want to use electric and some people don't really mind putting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. It's really a personal choice. I think we need to operate on the understanding, and colleagues have heard me say this so much that I'm reluctant to use the same phrase yet again, but this is the overarching existential issue of our time. And the transition from fossil fueled transportation and cleaner, less destructive transportation is not a lifestyle choice. It's an imperative. And the non-taxing of electric vehicles is an incentive to transition. Electric vehicles save money, but they're expensive to get into. And among the people who still downplay the urgency and the gravitas of global warming, there is often the idea that it's a sort of, that electric vehicles are elitist because they're expensive to get into, even though they ultimately save money. And the exemption from a fuel tax is an exemption from, it's not just a fuel tax, it's an air pollution tax. It's a global warming tax. And we do hear the resentment from people. I pay a tax to pollute the air. Why should people who don't pollute the air be exempt from the tax I have to pay? And I think it's important that we stand firm on the necessity of transitioning to electric vehicles. To be honest, I'm not confident that I will prevail on this vote, but I would, if nothing else, like to give myself and similarly minded people an opportunity to vote against doing this without voting against the transportation bill, which we obviously need. As far as the money here being earmarked for other green policies, we'll have to look for other sources of money. The idea that this is the proper place to look, I think, minimizes the significance of the issue.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree wholeheartedly with the need to transition to electric vehicles and the statements from the senator from Windsor on the issues around electric vehicles and carbon reductions and our need to reduce our usage of imported fossil fuels. However, I disagree that this usage fee or this EV infrastructure fee is a detriment to that. We're talking about $89 for an EV or $44.50 for a plug-in hybrid. That would be the fee. In discussions and testimony with Drive Electric Vermont, there's not clear evidence that $89 is going to be a disincentive, or $44.50 is going to be disincentive. On the other side, you have a $5,000 incentive. You have federal tax credits that even if you don't have tax liability, you can get through leasing. We have a lot of incentives for electric vehicles on the purchase price that far exceed $89 that you'd be paying. We also heard anecdotally a lot of people saying they want to pay, and specifically they want to pay. We heard from the Sierra Club that said this, like, if the money's going to go for the electric vehicle charging infrastructure, that is really a bigger barrier than $89 fee about getting new buyers into electric vehicles. They want to feel confident that they don't get stuck without electricity. So seeing more of these out there, seeing them in multifamily housing, where folks that don't have a single family home that we have a program to get a free charger from the utility for most customers in Vermont. But if you live in an apartment building, you don't have anywhere to put it. So money for this is really needed to get that section of the population into EVs. So we thought this was an important way to promote more EVs. We weren't thinking as a fee on there. And we thought it was a very reasonable fee that would help the same amount of money that the other body thought was necessary for that EV charging in those key locations. Also, we heard a lot of testimony on where we were with electric vehicles. There was a lot of discussion about this conversion of innovation curve in our climate plan. So when we talk about EV adoption, the plan was to start some kind of road usage fee for EVs when we reach 15% of new sales. At the end of 2023, we're around 10% and increasing a few percentage points per year, and we're on an exponential part of the curve. So we're past the early adopters. We're getting into that next section of the innovation dispersion curve. And so we're not at 15% yet. All the evidence from the Vehicle Dealers Association and for the Agency of Transportation is by the time this fee goes into effect, we will be at 15% or higher. So we will have met that requirement that's in our climate action plan to get to 15%. Where is an agreement amongst the advocates, the agencies, and the climate office that that's the time to start the fee. So we felt strongly in transportation that this was a wise choice as a way to encourage more EVs and get us on a path to a complete transition to electric vehicles. So we encourage you to vote for these sections, which I want a clarification on how the yes/no votes go on.
So the first vote would be, shall the bill be amended as found in the amended report in sections 27, 28, and 29? So a yes vote would move to amend the bill with those, so they would stay in, and a no vote would be that they would not be put into the bill. Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's always interesting here to hear the back and forth between different perspectives. I'm rising in support of supporting the transportation amendment as is for a couple reasons. One, the senator from Washington was alluding to the number of people who drive EVs who want to escape the sort of freeloader name that they've been targeted with for not contributing to the transportation system that they rely on. And I think there are a lot of people I've talked to that feel like I would like a way to participate in an orderly way. And so to me, it satisfies that requirement. The other thing is that until our grid is 100% renewable energy, there is a fossil fuel footprint to the electricity that is used to charge those cars. So yes, they're definitely cleaner than the internal combustion engine equivalents, but they still have some footprint. And so it also seems to me that a fee is not an unreasonable thing to assess at this point as the whole industry matures. And then I particularly appreciate the fact that those funds are being put into the kind of infrastructure that will not only support the current users of EVs, but encourage more people to get into them, folks who are concerned about the availability of charging stations.
Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the reporter of the bill, the chair of the committee?
The senator from Washington is interrogated as the reporter of the bill. Remember, the question is related to sections 27.
Yes.
Great.
So my question, first of all, I agree with my colleague from Addison, the senior senator from Addison. I support this and I do drive an EV. I think it makes sense, especially splitting it. But my question is, since we're focusing on this, is about the term pleasure cars. Because in reading this, it was confusing to me why this is all combined in with that section about pleasure cars. Are EVs considered pleasure cars, or are they a subset of pleasure cars? How does this relate, and what is a pleasure car?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think that's a term that's used for the registration. I'd have to look and to get more information on third reading, but if I'm remembering correctly, that's the term that's used. It's an existing statute for basically what we think of as a regular car, like a sedan or a coupe or things like that, not a big truck. You know, so the cars that I assume we all drive are pleasure cars, and that's an $89 registration fee. And since we're tying this fee to the registration fee. So that would be the connection to the term pleasure.
So a pleasure car is basically anything that's not a work vehicle? Is that-
It's not related to its work, it's related to its like weight or number of wheels or number of axles, things like that are things that would change the registration fee.
Okay, okay. It's an odd term. I hadn't heard it before. Thank you, I think, Mr. President.
Senator from Chittenden Central.
May I inquire of the chair of the committee?
The senator from Washington is interrogated as the vice chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Who did the committee hear from about the impacts this might have on middle and lower income Vermonters who may have switched to an electric vehicle to save money on their gas charges?
We did not hear specifically from anybody on that issue.
Thank you. I thank the senator. I have a concern that there may be people who would like to switch and who have a deep desire to do something for the environment, that this fee will simply make that impossible for them. We know that there are Vermonters who can't pay their registration now, and to more than double it feels like it would have a chilling effect. We often do hear that a lot of our climate solutions are somewhat elitist, and the fact that the people who drive electric vehicles tend to skew towards higher income, to me, says we are not doing enough to welcome our moderate and lower income Vermonters into these programs. And to me, this moves us in the wrong direction. Thank you.
Senator from Lamoille.
In rural Vermont, and I represent 10 communities in rural Vermont. I have 4 communities where there's public charging stations. I have 6 communities where there's no public charging stations. And I would submit that I think in rural Vermont, in my poorer communities that are in my county, the reason people don't switch is because there aren't public charging stations. And I think a lot of people would like to move in that direction and they don't, because there isn't the charging stations there. I think the best thing we can do is move around to a place where there's more charging stations that are out there. This does not take anyone that is in an electric vehicle in the way this overall process is constructed and put money towards the roads that they drive on. So we're keeping an incentive for people in electric cars to get those cars and drive on the road. What it does charge them for is charging stations. And until we can get a system of charging stations across the state where everybody feels comfortable that they can charge their car, we're not going to have the take up in electric cars that you would want out in the countryside in Vermont.
Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would, as a member of the Transportation Committee, I would like to just indicate that we spend some time in terms of the economic hardship that this fee might create. Obviously, it's more of a one-time as opposed to when you're paying the gas tax, which would be more than this fee. It's done every time you go to the pump. The other body had basically took the funding for charging support for residential and multifamily homes, and they took it out of public transit. And we were concerned about that because, in fact, the people who use public transit, particularly in rural areas, are low-income families or individuals. Many of them might be older or have disabilities. So we did try to look at the amount, and we looked at what other states were doing. And in setting this, it is a lesser amount than would have been paid if you were using a non-hybrid or EV entirely. We were concerned when we had the bill that came over to us, took 1.7 million away from public transit, which would allow more EV Sprinter vans and smaller vehicles that would be more responsive to need and much more economical to operate, as well as they would not be carbon emitting vehicles. So this, what we're discussing here is really how your Transportation Committee tried to weigh out all the different factors to get us to where we are, what we have included in the bill. But I would just simply like to say, we're trying to evaluate those economic impacts in terms of what would happen if we agreed with the bill that came over, and how that would be detrimental to our public transit needs and our ability to be more responsive and do micro transit, and how we set the fee relative to other states and relative to what that cost would be if it were in terms of the gas tax savings. So I just wanted to speak to sort of that weighing out and the balance that the committee deliberated and came to what is before you now. Thank you.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. When answering the question from the senator from Chittenden Central, that it's true that we didn't have any witness to testify to that, but it was a point of discussion in the committee, was a concern. It was something that, like the senator from California just referred to, something that we talked about. And what our weighing was not only the issues around public transportation and where the kind of money's going to go, but that this is saving folks money if we can get them into these vehicles. We have the Replace Your Ride program, which is specifically for low-income Vermonters to get into an EV. We can give them $5,000. You might be able to get cash for the tax incentives. There's other incentives that we have through our utilities. So there's ways of getting low-income Vermonters into these vehicles that are just going to save them money instead of buying the gas. So this is a way to get them into more electric vehicles that we saw as a way to saving money. $89, it's an all EV, or $44.50 is less than an average person pays for gas, and much less for somebody that's in a rural area that might drive more. So we see this as a way of helping low-income Vermonters save money on their transportation by both supporting public transportation and supporting them moving into electric vehicles, both with charging in multifamily housing and just putting them in the vehicle. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Windsor.
This is my second time up. I think it is unfortunate and not logically necessary to juxtapose the incentive that would be done away with by these amendments, to juxtapose that incentive with other methods for combating global warming, for encouraging and expediting cleaner transportation. The arguments I'm hearing is that if we don't do away with the incentive, then we're going to have to take money from other efforts. We have a general fund. We have a transportation fund that does all manner of transportation expenses that don't introduce greenhouse gases. It is not as though we are facing a choice. Oppose greenhouse gases this way or that way. If money is to be raised by doing away with the incentive are not then available for other anti-global warming initiatives, we have an $8 billion budget. We have other places to look other than charging stations.
Question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Transportation Committee as amended in the 27th, 28th, and 29th instances or sections as found on pages 2673 through 2675 of today's calendar? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. and you have amended the bill as offered by the Committee on Transportation as amended in the sections 27, 28, and 29. Question now is, shall the bill be further amended as offered by the Committee on Transportation as amended in all of the other sections besides 27, 28, and 29? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have further amended the bill as offered by the Committee on Transportation as amended in all of those other sections besides those three sections. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you've ordered third reading of H 868. We now have up for consideration H 27. H 27 is read for the first time, is referred to the Committee on Judiciary, which considered the same and recommends that when amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H 27, an act relating to coercive controlling behavior and abuse prevention orders.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill for the report of the Committee on Judiciary, the Senator from Bennington.
President, thank you. The issue of coercive and controlling behavior is an important one for us to take up. And your Committee on Judiciary spent a great deal of time on this issue, trying to get it right. There are other states that have passed such a law, such as Arkansas, California, Connecticut, Hawaii, Michigan, Washington, and Puerto Rico. And 6 additional states have similar language in their statutory definitions without it being explicitly defined as coercive control. These states include Colorado, Delaware, Maine, Missouri, Montana, and Oregon. Mr. President, one of the criticisms of the bill as it came to us from the court was that it may be overly broad and vague. There may be an increase in the number of cases. I want to make clear, this is a civil protection order, not a criminal protection order or a criminal issue. And S27 would amend the definition of abuse to include coercing, controlling behavior for purposes of Vermont's law regarding domestic relief from abuse orders, or sometimes known as RFAs. At the hearing, the plaintiff has the burden of proving abuse by a preponderance of the evidence. The court would make such orders as it deems necessary to protect the plaintiff or the children or both, if the court finds that the defendant has abused the plaintiff and there is danger of further abuse. If the defendant is currently incarcerated and has been convicted of one of the following: murder, attempted murder, kidnapping, domestic assault, aggravated domestic assault, sexual assault, aggravated sexual assault, stalking, aggravated stalking, lewd, lascivious conduct with a child, or the use of a child in a sexual performance, or consenting to a sexual performance. Currently, the purposes of the civil statute abuse means the occurrence of one or more of the following acts: attempting to cause or causing physical harm, placing another in fear of imminent serious physical harm, and abuse to children, stalking, sexual assault, so forth. H27, as we worked on it, we became increasingly concerned about what would happen, and these are the types of conversations you have in committee. What happens if a parent takes the cell phone away from the child? Is that means for the child to go to court and get a relief from abuse order? Most of us would say no, but it's always something that you might see, and that was part of the vagueness. So what the committee did was said, why should we reinvent the wheel if it's already been invented? And we took Connecticut law and Maine laws and kind of combined them into this strike all amendment. We also learned of several Supreme Court rulings, US and Vermont court rulings on parents' rights. And Mr. President, there it is. So in the case of, and I may get these names mixed up, Troxel versus Granville addressed the parent's constitutional right to raise his or child without an undue interference by the state. And the United States Supreme Court struck down an overly broad Washington state statute that allowed any person to petition for visitation rights. The court declared that the state, this US Supreme Court declared the statute unconstitutional due to the absence of any deference to the parent's decision-making concerning the child. After that US Supreme Court decision, Vermont's grandparent visitation laws were examined by the Vermont Supreme Court in Glidden versus Conway. And the court noted freedom of personal choice in matters of marriage and family life is one of the liberties protected by due process clause of the 14th Amendment. The interest of a parent in a custody, care, and control of his child or hers, they didn't say that, may be the oldest of fundamental liberty interests in our federal constitution protects. As long as a parent provides competent care for his or her child, the court reasoned there is no basis for state intervention. So the committee was somewhat guided by that Supreme Court decision, which was much broader than just the grandparent visitation, which I'm sure many of you have heard from grandparents concerned about their grandchildren and why they can't get that visitation. And it is due to that Supreme Court ruling. So, Mr. President, the definitions were modeled from Connecticut and Maine. And some highlights: controlling, regulating, or monitoring the family or household members' movements, communications, daily behavior, finances, economic resources, or access to services. We even talked about situations in committee where one would, for example, when I was providing care for my wife, I often had to tell her to stay seated because she would fall if she got up. That was coercive control to the extent that I was trying to help her, but not coercive control that I was trying to harm her. The compelling family or household member by force, threat, intimidation, but not limited to threats based on actual or suspected immigration status, engaging in conduct from which the family or household member has a right to abstain from conduct that such family or household member has a right to pursue, committing or threatening to commit cruelty to animals that intimidates the family or household member, forced sex acts or threats of sexual nature, including but not limited to acts of sexual conduct, threats based on a person's sexuality, or threats to release sexual images. So, Mr. President, I think, and the majority of the committee on a 4-to-1 vote agreed that this is an important piece of legislation to have in the toolbox. I am hopeful that we have covered all the bases in the strike all amendment, that it is no longer vague. We have confidence in the rulings of our Vermont Supreme Court. And in this matter, the rulings of the United States Supreme Court. So the vote, as I said, was 4-to-1 in committee, and we urge the Senate to support this bill.
Two quick things. First, it's been brought to our attention, it appears there may be a Scribner's error. If folks want to look at their calendar on page 2683, as you look through the definitions section of section 1, each of the other words defined includes the word means. And on number 2, near the bottom of page 2683, it says, quote, coercive controlling behavior, a pattern of, and the word means is probably missing there. So we'll consider that a Scribner's error. But if otherwise, we'll correct it before third reading.
We have to find that Scribner's.
That's right. So the question is, I wasn't necessarily calling you to speak, I was just explaining the Scrivener's error. So with that, the question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Judiciary? Senator from Chittenden South East.
Thank you, Mr. President. As some in the body may know, I used to help people get these types of protection orders as my profession outside of the legislature. And I very much applaud this language as it relates to relief from abuse orders. For many victims of abuse, they can't present physical acts of abuse, a bruise, a twisted arm, as the means by which they experience that abuse. So I very much applaud that in this section. Because of my intimate experience with this section of law, I have a similar question that I've had in the past when we talk about relief from abuse orders. And for that reason, I wonder if I might interrogate the reporter of the bill and the chair of the committee.
Senator from Bennington is interrogated as the reporter of the bill.
Mr. President, as the senator may recall, last time we looked at relief from abuse orders, I highlighted the separate section of statute that covers relief from exploitation orders. Those particularly relate to vulnerable adults and seniors who may have someone else coercing their behavior and controlling their finances. That person doesn't always necessarily live in the same household as the person that they're exploiting. And so I was curious if the changes reflected here cover that same relationship of relief from exploitation, or if that otherwise would need to be mirrored to protect vulnerable adults and seniors who do not have someone living in their household who's exploiting them.
Well, I believe that there's a definition of household member, but it also includes in B, placing another, doesn't necessarily have to be placing another in fear of imminent serious physical harm. I believe, I can check before third reading with Ledge Council, but I believe that that would cover the situations that the committee, that the senator was looking at. But I want to check before I give the final answer with Ledge Council. And unfortunately, she's in a caregiver role today. And we will check.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm satisfied that while this would have a big impact on a certain population, and if needed to be changed, would reflect a minor change that could have a big impact on a otherwise excluded population, that we can either look at the language to ensure that that situation is covered or add another reference to that statute. So I look forward to working with other relevant stakeholders before third reading.
Question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Judiciary? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Rutland.
Mr. President, can I request a 1 minute recess?
We'll take a 1 minute recess. Senate will please come to order. The current question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Judiciary? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. You have adopted the report of the Committee on Judiciary. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it. You've ordered third reading of H27, excuse me. We now have on the calendar for action a proposal of amendment to the Vermont Constitution. Chapter 2, Section 2072 of Vermont's Constitution sets forth requirements for amending the Constitution. Proposals can be initiated only at a biennial session that commences every 4 years. After this year, the next window of opportunity is 2027. Proposals must originate in the Senate and must be approved by 2/3 of the total membership, which is 20 senators. This is the equivalent of the second reading of the proposal in the Senate. After Senate approval, the House must concur by a majority vote of its membership, which would be 76 representatives. The House cannot amend the proposal. During the next biennial session, both the Senate and House must approve the proposals under the Vermont Constitution with at least 16 votes in affirmative in the Senate and by at least a majority of a quorum in the House. No amendments may be made either by the Senate or the House. A proposal of amendment is then voted on by the general populace at the next general election. If approved by a majority of the voters who vote, the proposal then becomes part of the Constitution. We have for action a proposed amendment to the Vermont Constitution, Proposal 4, Declaration of Rights, Government for the People, Equality Rights, introduced on May 12th, 2023, and referred to the Committee on Judiciary, which reports that it is considered the same and recommends that the proposal of amendment be amended as reported on page 2686 of today's calendar, and when so amended, ought to be adopted. Please listen to the reading of Proposal 4.
Proposal 4, Section 1, Purpose. This proposal would amend the Constitution of the State of Vermont to specify that the government must not deny equal treatment and respect under the law on account of a person's race, ethnicity, sex, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, or national origin. The Constitution is our founding legal document stating the overarching values of our society. This amendment is in keeping with the values espoused by the current Vermont Constitution. Chapter 1, Article 1 declares that all persons are born equally free and independent and have certain natural, inherent, and unalienable rights. Chapter 1, Article 7 states that government is or ought to be instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of the people. The core value reflected in Article 7 is that all people should be afforded the benefits and protections bestowed by the government, and that the government should not confer special advantages upon the privileged. This amendment would expand upon the principles of equality and liberty by ensuring that the government does not create or perpetuate the legal, social, or economic inferiority of any class of people. This proposed constitutional amendment is not intended to limit the scope of rights and protections afforded by any other provision in the Vermont Constitution. B, providing for equality of rights as a fundamental principle in the Constitution would serve as a foundation for protecting the rights and dignity of historically marginalized populations and addressing existing inequalities. This amendment would reassert the broad principles of personal liberty and equality reflected in the Constitution of the State of Vermont with authoritative force, longevity, and symbolic importance. Section 2. Article 7 of Chapter 1 of the Vermont Constitution is amended to read, existing language. Article 7, government for the people, they may change it. that government is or ought to be instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of the people, nation, or community, and not for the particular emolument or advantage of any single person, family, or set of persons who are part of that community. New language. That the government shall not deny equal treatment and respect under the law on account of a person's race, ethnicity, sex, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, or national origin, existing language, and that the community hath an indubitable, unalienable, and indefeasible right to reform or alter government in such manner as shall be, by that community, judged most conducive to the public weal. Section 3, effective date. The amendment set forth in Section 2 shall become part of the Constitution of the State of Vermont on the first Tuesday after the first Monday of November 2026, when ratified and adopted by the people of this state in accordance with the provisions of 17 VSA Chapter 32.
Now you've heard the reading of Proposal 4. There is a report of the Committee on Judiciary found on page 2686, as well as a proposal of amendment to the report to be found on page 2688. It's my understanding that both the report and the amendment will be reported by the senator from Windsor. I'd like to recognize, Wyndham. I'd like to recognize the senator from Wyndham.
Thank you, Mr. President. As was mentioned, this proposal and its corresponding amendments can be found on page 2685. And this presentation will incorporate the amendments as well as I described the proposed amendment. So I spent the last couple of weeks contemplating how to begin this presentation, and two of my colleagues suggested that perhaps I was overthinking things. And so I decided to keep it simple and just address those two commonly heard questions that we hear in this building, which is, why do we need this? Which is often followed by, what problem are we trying to solve? And my straightforward answer is that throughout our country's history, both the US Supreme Court and state legislatures have inconsistently applied the intent and core commitments of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. And I want to provide some historical context as to why I hold that opinion. The 14th Amendment was ratified shortly after the Civil War during Reconstruction in 1868. Primary author, a congressman named John Bingham from Ohio, who was a leading anti-slavery voice in Congress, stated that, in summary, the goal of the amendment is to ensure that states provide equal treatment under the law to all citizens within their borders, and that such a principle is fundamental to the success of any republic. I do also want to give credit to our own Vermont Congressman, Frederick Woodbridge of Virginia, who helped Mr. Bingham with the original drafting of the 14th Amendment. But despite the originally stated intent, the 14th Amendment has been used as a justification to separate different people in various aspects of society during its early days. For example, it was used in part to justify the infamous decision in Plessy versus Ferguson, which created the idea that separate but equal was sufficient under the 14th Amendment. However, the 14th Amendment was used again 58 years later in Brown versus Board of Education to repeal separate but equal and also begin the process of affirmative action. Now, I would not consider 58 years of lawful segregation to be a successful implementation and application of that clause. And we can also look to many other examples that illustrate how the different classifications listed in this amendment were discriminated against despite the existence of the Equal Protection Clause. And I'm not going to cover every single instance, but I will provide a snapshot. Remaining on the topic of race and ethnicity, it was not until 1964 that the Civil Rights Act was ratified, coinciding with the Voting Rights Act, which culminated in the end of the Jim Crow era segregation laws. These laws, these Jim Crow laws, were a collection of statutes passed by multiple state legislatures to enforce various forms of segregation and discrimination. In fact, states began passing Jim Crow laws within just 2 years of the 14th Amendment's ratification. Regarding national origin, between 1942 and 46, multiple states, along with our federal government, sent approximately 120,000 Japanese Americans, both those who were born here and those who immigrated here, to internment camps. And this was done without due process, even though the 14th Amendment includes the incorporation doctrine, which extends due process to the states. And when we look at gender and sexual orientation, we can see that women did not have equal access to the ballot until 1920, after the 19th Amendment was passed. Just 5 years after the passage of the 14th Amendment, the case of Myra Bradwell, who was born here in Vermont, led to the Supreme Court stating that she could not become a licensed attorney because, in their words, the law of the Creator required that men and women stay in their respective spheres, and that women should instead perform the duties of being a wife and mother. Their words, not mine. Based on that reasoning, the court found that the 14th Amendment did not apply in such a way that Myra could be treated equally under the existing licensing laws. I do just want to provide a full picture. Many years later, when she was at the end of her life, she did receive her license as a sort of honorary consolation. Regarding sexual orientation, it was only in 2003 that Texas's law that criminalized being gay was found unconstitutional and thus became unenforceable. And here in Vermont, we were a little bit ahead of Texas. We repealed our own laws outlawing homosexuality in 1977, which was only 47 years ago. A bit more recently, anti-discrimination laws based on gender identity were enacted here in Vermont in 2007, which is only 17 years ago. And same-sex marriages became legal here in 2009, only 15 years ago. Now, while I'm listing steps that we've taken to address discrimination and unequal treatment under the law, the most important part of this presentation is to convey the fact that the progress we've made in statute or common law, both in Vermont and nationally, can be repealed or overturned. For example, when I was in the other body and we were debating the Reproductive Liberty Amendment, opposition stated that the amendment was a solution in search of a problem and that we were looking for a boogeyman that didn't exist. A few years later, Roe was overturned and we continue to see attacks on reproductive liberty across the country. Now, I've lived here for a majority of my life, and I can't envision a Vermont where we would create or enforce laws in such a way that would cause unequal treatment against anyone based on their ethnicity, national origin, religion, disability, sexual orientation, or gender identity or gender expression. But I also think back to different state legislatures in the early years of our country where I'm sure that the idea of free Black Americans or women who could vote and own property were to them completely ludicrous ideas. In considering all of this, I remind myself of the bigger picture beyond the 2-year biennium that we understandably become hyper-focused on. Whether it was 15 years ago or 47 years ago, that is not the distant past in which we've had laws or an absence of laws that have led to disparate treatment of our citizens. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know who'll be sitting here in 50 years or 100 years, and I don't know what their beliefs may be. But I do know with a strong conviction that I don't want to witness a future in my lifetime or future generations' lifetimes in which government can pass or enforce laws that discriminate and cause division among Vermonters. And so that is the problem that this amendment proposes to address. And I want to conclude this preamble by revisiting my earlier statement, and then I'll proceed to the text of the amendment. So I had stated that I believe the US Supreme Court had inconsistently applied the Equal Protection Clause. And I didn't say that to sound controversial or edgy. In fact, I was repeating the very same thing that the court said about itself in the Equal Protection Clause less than a year ago. Mr. President, may I read several sentences from SFFA versus Harvard from 2023?
Without objection, you may.
Thank you. Quote, despite our early recognition of the broad sweep of the Equal Protection Clause, this court, alongside the country, quickly failed to live up to the clause's core commitments. For almost a century after the Civil War, state-mandated segregation was in many parts of the nation a regrettable norm. This court played its own role in that ignoble history, allowing in Plessy versus Ferguson, the separate but equal regime that would come to deface much of America. The aspirations of the framers of the Equal Protection Clause, virtually strangled in their infancy, would remain for too long only that, aspirations, end quote. Now, the irony of this statement, which I think furthers my original point, is that the originating case itself is one which actually narrows the scope of affirmative action for college admissions. Now for the amendment. This is the amendment as intended with the amendments that we've discussed, or that I will discuss towards the end of this presentation. That the people are guaranteed equal protection under the law. Excuse me. That the people are guaranteed equal protection under the law. The state shall not deny equal treatment under the law on account of a person's race, ethnicity, sex, religion, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, or national origin. Nothing in this article shall be interpreted or applied to prevent the adoption or implementation of measures intended to provide equality of treatment an opportunity for members of groups that have historically been subject to discrimination. This amendment is a step forward to strengthen the foundation that will protect future generations of Vermonters from potentially discriminatory laws. And as I mentioned earlier, we can't predict the future, but we can look into the past and see that both state governments and the federal government are capable of creating discriminatory laws. There is no reason to think that they are incapable of doing so in the future as well. And we are seeing these laws pop up in other regions of the country. For instance, according to the Human Rights Campaign, over 500 anti-LGBTQ bills were introduced in legislatures in 2023. We've also seen 14 states enact legislation that makes it harder to vote, along with legislation that increases penalties for protests and limits on freedom of speech when it comes to discussing issues related to sexual orientation and gender in secondary and post-secondary classrooms. The characteristics described in the second sentence of the amendment all fall into different classifications. There's nothing new or experimental here when it comes to what courts take into consideration when determining these types of classifications, and they've all previously been described or defined in federal law, state law, or common law. I do just want to note that judges and justices can form their own definitions. They do their own interpretations and analysis, and then issue their opinions. The third sentence refers to the concept of remedying past discrimination, which is a doctrine that was first codified in the 1960s. This sentence is meant to preempt the misuse of this amendment to further discriminatory practices. Any laws that a future legislature may pass that are intended to remedy past discrimination must still follow common law and remain within the constitutionally prescribed limits. These laws and limits cannot be overcome or circumvented by state law due to the supremacy clause in the US Constitution. Overall, this amendment, if passed, does not suddenly create, remove, or modify existing laws. Of course, it is possible for someone to challenge existing and future laws as unconstitutional under this amendment, as they can with any other article to our Constitution. But this amendment, like all articles of a Constitution, serve as a sort of foundation or framework for future laws as well. And while it may have an impact on future laws, it's also an important symbolic component of our Constitution. As stated in the purpose section, our Constitution is our founding legal document that states our overarching values as a society. The majority of Vermonters I've met have been tolerant, welcoming, and curious about diversity, regardless of their own traits or beliefs. I know I've shared a number of historical examples and quoted from cases and so on, but I want to conclude with a quick story about my own experience back in 2018 when I first started campaigning for a seat in the other body. And to be frank, I had no idea what I was doing. I was told I needed to knock on doors and smile a lot more. I blame my former profession for that. But either way, I started in my own neighborhood, and maybe the third or fourth door that I knocked on was a neighbor I hadn't met yet. And he was a funny guy. But the very first thing he said was, "Why the hell would I vote for another damn Democrat?" And I remember thinking to myself, all right, I don't know if I'm picking the right career change here, but my first instinct was to just say, sorry to bother you, have a nice day. But instead, I decided to stick around and we chatted for a while. We found some common ground. We talked about income inequality and a mutual dislike of a certain very large telecommunications company. But we also had some disagreements. He had very strong religious beliefs, and he had views that were opposed to abortion that were in contradiction with my views. So that's fine. At the end of it all, he said, all right, I'm not donating a single penny to you, but I'll probably end up voting for you. And I said, hey, that's fine. But really, much more importantly than all of that was, instead of walking away and just leaving that divide, I ended up making a friend and a neighbor despite our differences. And the main takeaway from this, at least for me, is that we can and should be able to coexist with our neighbors and our fellow Vermonters, even if they have different traits or beliefs than us. We can and should be able to coexist with folks who may have different religious views or come from different countries or have a sexual orientation that's different from our own, or any of the other traits listed in this amendment. And the laws that we create should follow those same ideas of accepting and coexisting with our fellow Vermonters without discriminating against them based on their characteristics or beliefs. That is why we need this amendment. Now, there are a couple of amendments to the amendment. There is an amendment that provides that this proposal will be in its own section. We also added the word religion. I firmly believe that religion should be in this article, as freedom of religion is, in my opinion, an essential element in our country. And we had an interesting conversation about the word respect about a week and a half ago. Myself and a few others noticed the word respect in this language and did a bit of research. We could not find a precedent for the word respect under the law. We also, Ledge Council consulted with a constitutional law professor from the Vermont Law and Graduate School, who also agreed that there is no precedent or real definition for the word respect in this context. And so we removed, well, the amendment proposes to remove the words "and respect" from this proposal. We heard from the following witnesses: the lead sponsor, Senator Lyons, Legislative Counsel, the Executive Director of the Vermont Commission on Women, the Racial Equity Policy and Research Analyst from the Office of Racial Equity, the Executive Director and Legal Counsel from the Vermont Human Rights Commission, the Executive Director of the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, the Policy Analyst from the Vermont Family Alliance, the Advocacy Director and a staff attorney from the ACLU of Vermont, and a constitutional law professor from the Vermont Law and Graduate School. The vote in committee was 5-0-0, and I ask for the Senate support.
Question is, shall the recommendation of amendment of the Committee on Judiciary be amended as recommended by Senators Hashim and others? Are you ready for that question? For clarity, that can be found on page 2688 at the top of the page. Are you ready for the question? If so, the secretary shall call the roll.
Senator Baru.
Yes.
Senator Bray.
Yes.
Senator Brock.
Yes.
Senator Campion.
Yes.
Senator Chittenden.
Yes.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collmore.
Yes.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Senator Bueller.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Harrison.
Yes.
Senator Hashim.
Yes.
Senator Ingalls.
Yes.
Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator McDonald.
Yes.
Senator McCormack.
Yes.
Senator Norris.
Yes.
Senator Pershman.
Yes.
Senator Ron Hinsdale.
Yes.
Senator Seer.
Yes.
Senator Starr.
Yes.
Senator Bohowski.
Yes.
Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Weeks.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Senator White.
Yes.
Senator Williams.
Yes.
Senator Renner.
Yes.
Please listen to the results of your vote. Those voting yea, 29, those voting nay, 0. And you have amended the judiciary amendment as offered by the senators from the committee. The question now is, shall the proposal amendment 4 be amended as recommended by the Committee on Judiciary as amended? Are you ready for that question? If so, Secretary shall commence to call the roll.
Senator Baru.
Yes.
Senator Bray.
Yes.
Senator Brock.
Yes.
Senator Campion.
Yes.
Senator Chittenden.
Yes.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collmore.
Yes.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Senator Bueller.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Harrison.
Yes.
Senator Hashim.
Yes.
Senator Ingalls.
Yes.
Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator McDonald.
Yes.
Senator McCormick.
Yes.
Senator Norris.
Yes.
Senator Pershman.
Yes.
Senator Ron Hinsdale.
Yes.
Senator Seer. Senator Starr.
Yes.
Senator Bohowski.
Yes.
Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Weeks.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Senator White.
Yes.
Senator Williams,
Yes.
Senator Renner,
Yes.
Please listen to the results of your vote. Those voting yea, 29. Those voting nay, 0. And you have adopted the report of the Committee on Judiciary as amended. Question now is, shall the Senate adopt Proposal Amendment 4 to the Constitution of Vermont as amended, as recommended by the Committee on Judiciary, and request concurrence of the House? Senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Might I inquire of the reporter?
The senator from Wyndham is interrogated as a reporter.
Mr. President, I think we would all benefit if the reporter could elucidate on why the common benefits clause of the Vermont Constitution is not adequate.
Sure, let me just pull up that language. So common benefits clause is not intended to serve as an equal protection clause. And this was actually established in Baker versus State, which was a Vermont case, I believe 1999. And that was, one moment. Yes, so I'll just leave it that it's been established in our court, our Vermont Supreme Court, that the common benefits clause is not the equivalent to an equal protection clause. And so that is why we felt it was necessary.
Question is, shall the Senate adopt the proposal of Amendment 4 to the Constitution of Vermont as amended, as recommended by the Committee on Judiciary, and request concurrence of the House? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. We heard, and I thank you, presenter, for this proposal. 8 years ago, and a couple of months prior to right now, in 2016, I started looking at the cultural shift that was occurring as a result of the political environment in our country. And I was very much concerned about a couple of things. One, about equal rights for women, because we hadn't had a full protection under the United States Constitution, and this state did not vote for an equal rights amendment. My second concern was about the very disturbing words I was hearing about ethnic and racial horrible concerns about ethnic and racial underrepresented groups in our country. And so it occurred to me at the same time I was hearing about changes to Roe v. Wade. I was hearing it in political conversation. Perhaps it was an undertone, but for me it became an overtone. And so I put it on my musical agenda. I wrote and then introduced both those constitutional amendments, one of which was the Reproductive Liberty Amendment that we acted on last November. And the other was this one. The first time it was introduced in actually introduced it in 2017 and 18, and then found out that that's not the year we do constitutional amendments. So back to the drawing board and returned with that constitutional amendment again in 2019 and 20, and that did include religion. It wasn't taken up by the Judiciary Committee for various reasons. And so I went back to the drawing board again in 21 and 22, but that wasn't the year we could look at it. So now in 23 and 24, I talked with various lawyers and said, well, maybe we take out religion and maybe we embed it into Article 7. And so that was the decision that was made, and the Judiciary Committee has returned it to its appropriate self. I will say that during the process, I've worked with a huge group of people and pulled folks around a table for a conversation about what should we be introducing in our state. Should it be an equal rights amendment? individually for gender, for women only? Or should it be an inclusive equal rights amendment? And the conclusion was, it should be inclusive. It should be as it is today. And we know that we have protections in our Constitution. We have benefits in our Constitution. This will affirm equal rights. This will affirm a playing ground that's level. This will add what we need that reflects our values and our culture that have been predominant in our state for many, many years. And we've heard the statutory changes that we've had in our state as a result of our beliefs and our values. So this will begin a new generation of laws that will continue to be written under a new article, which I sincerely hope will be passed out of this body by the vote required, that will go to the House and then will go to the people of the state after another session. Mr. President, I won't say any more because I think we know enough and we value what we're doing here. I think this is another step that Vermont is taking that leads the nation. Other states may well have some protections in their constitution, but they don't have what we have, and that's the voice of the people. So thank you, Mr. President.
Question is, shall the Senate adopt proposal of Amendment 4 to the Constitution of Vermont as amended, as recommended by the Committee on Judiciary, and request concurrence of the House? Are you ready for the question? If so, Secretary shall call the roll.
Senator Baruch. Senator Bray. Senator Brock.
Yes.
Senator Campion.
Yes.
Senator Chittenden.
Yes.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collmore.
Yes.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Senator Gulick.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Harrison.
Yes.
Senator Hashim.
Yes.
Senator Ingalls.
Yes.
Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator McDonald.
Yes.
Senator McCormack.
Yes.
He's not coming back.
Senator Norris.
Yes.
Senator Pershing.
Yes.
Senator Ron Hinsdale.
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes.
Senator Starr.
Yes.
Senator Duhosky.
Yes.
Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Weeks.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Senator White.
Yes.
Senator Williams.
Yes.
Senator Renner.
Yes.
Senator Baruch.
Please listen to the results of your vote. Those voting yea, 28. Those voting nay, 0. With 2/3 of the senators' vote required, which is 20, you have adopted the fourth proposal of amendment. That now brings us to H 247. Third reading of H 247 has been ordered. H 247 is an act relating to Vermont's adoption of the Occupational Therapy Licensure Compact. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H 247, an act relating to Vermont's adoption of the Occupational Therapy Licensure Compact.
Current question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? You're right. Shall the bill pass? Question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have passed H 247. I apologize, I was distracted. Our next bill for consideration is H 649. Third reading was ordered. It's an act relating to the Vermont Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H 649, an act relating to the Vermont Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Now the question is, shall the bill pass? Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to answer one of the questions that I received on second reading. I spoke to the general counsel of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and what I was told was that these support groups, like many support groups, will form organically based on shared experience, and that the commission isn't going to take a hand in saying who must be or may not be in the groups. It's really meant to support people organically as things come up for them.
Question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? Excuse me, sorry. The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have passed H 649. It's my understanding we're passing over 534, which would bring us to H 546. H 546 was read the first time for the Committee on Finance, which recommends that when the bill is amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill is then referred to Committee on Appropriations, which also recommends that when amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H 546, an act relating to administrative and policy changes to tax laws.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill for the report of the Committee on Finance, Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think this is my 20th time, plus or minus, to present this bill. It's one of my favorite bills because the topic is so broad that towards the end of the session, a lot of bills and proposals are germane. It's called the Christmas tree. And your Committee on Finance has frequently brought you a Christmas tree that is so decorated that Balsam Hill would be proud of it. Unfortunately, this year, we did so little decoration that I think Charlie Brown might be ashamed of this tree. But I will go through it, and maybe next year we can present you with a better decorated bill. The first section of the bill correctly identifies that the $8.50 per grand list parcel fee that is paid to the towns is paid out of the general fund, not the education fund. That's the way it's always been, and this is just correcting it. Section 2. Okay, section 2 right now, if an individual or a town goes to court and gets their property valuation reduced, PBR, the law requires them to go until there are no more appeals to do that. This would allow the commissioner to waive that requirement when it's pretty obvious that the appeals are all going to turn out the same way. Sections 3 and 4 are annual link to the federal income tax laws. We do this every year. Section 5 increases the number of people that would be eligible for renter tax, the renter, it's not tax credit anymore, renter credit. And I can go over that, but it basically changes the from very low to low income. Every year, we have had a surplus in that fund. The idea is really to get as much help out to people, especially as rents are rising at a very rapid rate. And this would make more people eligible. Section 6 and 7 repeals the $15 fee for property tax. This is for your renter rebate calculation. If your claims are filed after April 15th, there is a $15 late fee. The tax department feels that with all their new upgrades in their computer system, that they can't justify charging people. They say most of them come in before they even release the grand list to the towns. This one will have an impact, probably about $88,000, which will
be distributed over the towns, depending on how many appeals they have. Section 9 states that county property is exempt from property taxes, state property tax. Right now, town property, in the event, I'm assuming because this here, some county somewhere owns some property, and it would be exempt just like the town's other governmental functions. Section 10 extends the sunset on the fuel tax to 2029. Section 11 and 12 extends the sunset for the health IT fund to 2026. Section 13 and 14. Okay, and with this, we get to our decoration sections. We left out 2 studies that were in the original bill. One was to study revenue sharing with towns, and the other one was to study the possibility of a wealth tax in this state, both of which we took out because talking to staff, both Joint Fiscal, Ledge Council, and the tax department were very clear that they had their hands full and that this would be more than they could handle. So those were removed. Okay, then we added sections 13 and 14. Right now, if you sell a snowmobile, this was brought to us by our member from transportation. You sell a snowmobile individually, not as a dealership, you owe sales tax on that. And you pay it at the time you register your snowmobile. An ATV, very similar, is not charged sales tax. This would create equity, and both ATVs and ATVs would be subject to that tax. So that one is in there. Section 15. Okay, section 15 for the proposed budget, because the fee for copies of vital event certificates, birth certificates, marriage certificates is waived for individuals experiencing homelessness or leaving a foster home or residential care facility. This is just based on ability to pay in a certain sense of fairness, has de minimis impact. Okay, then miscellaneous tax goes just before the budget. And the reason for that is that some years we need to raise some money to balance the budget. And that's the way it is this year. We were asked with, I think, 4 days' notice to raise somewhere between $16 and $18 million in order to accomplish some of the goals in the budget. We've done that. We have raised some DFR fees. One of them makes us the highest, but it is a way that impacts out-of-state insurance companies, primarily securities companies. This is money that is paid, and anything over and above what DFR doesn't need to cover their costs is remitted to the state every year. And so we were able to, we raised initial and annual insurance producer appointment fees, notice filings for securities, registration fee for agents of securities, brokers, and issuers. Okay, and then section 20, because we could not do the study for revenue sharing. We do have a method of revenue sharing. It's called the local options tax. Your Senate Finance Committee, I believe, has voted out on close to 5 occasions the ability of a town to, upon the vote of a majority of the citizens, to initiate a local options tax. That's a one-room, rooms, meals, alcohol, or sales tax. And this, right now, with the advent of online sales, it becomes more advantageous. You don't have to have a downtown shopping district. So this was our kind of way of helping towns out with raising some revenue. I believe, Mr. President, that is it. And the vote on your committee was 5-1-1, and we asked this body to concur.
Bill is then referred to Committee on Finance, which considered the bill and recommends further proposal amendments. Senator from Caledonia. Appropriations. What did I say? Finance?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you, Mr. President.
My apologies.
Your Appropriations Committee has an amendment to offer their a substitute to what is in the calendar. We found out we had to make some just technical changes because of a date appearing in two different places. So what we have here is something that may be very familiar to what we did before, and that is we remove the revenues, the fees, and they're going to travel in the budget. This is what we did last year with the DMV fees to support our transportation program. So we are removing the fees that are included here, as was referenced in the presentation of the bill from Finance, and they will be instead folded into the big bill. We added two new sections related to this sales tax exemption. And then we extended the exemption from June 30th, 2024 to 2027. And then new sections 16 through 17. And this is, again, a deadline extension for utilizing the machinery and equipment tax credits from 2026 to 2030. And then we had to realign the effective dates accordingly. So this amendment to the miscellaneous tax bill is being offered by your members of your Appropriations Committee, and we ask for your concurrence.
So just to clarify, just for 1 second, go ahead.
No.
I was just going to clarify what the motion is and what the vote is at the moment, because we don't often deal with substitute amendments. So the first vote will actually be to substitute the amendment as offered, handed out by the senators on the Appropriations Committee for the amendment that you find in your calendar. Then we'll have a vote to amend the report of the Committee on Finance as offered, as substituted and offered by the senators on the Committee on Appropriations. So I just want to make that clear. Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Finance had a presentation on the amendment from Appropriations, and we had no objections.
So the question is, shall the amendment offered by the Committee on Appropriations be substituted by the amendment handed out with lead sponsor Senator Kitchell and others? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have substituted the amendment offered by Senator Kitchell and others for the amendment offered by the Committee on Appropriations. The question now is, shall the report of the Committee on Finance be amended as offered by the Committee on Appropriations as substituted? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. I hope I'm standing in the right space, but things got a little confusing. May I inquire of the member from the Committee on Finance?
The senator from the Committee on Finance is interrogated so long as it's about the parts of the that are in this amendment that were handed out.
I don't.
You may want to wait.
Underlying.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, we'll pause for that for a moment. The question is, shall the report of the Committee on Finance be amended as offered by the Committee on Appropriations as substituted? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have amended the report of the Committee on Finance as offered by the Committee on Appropriations as substituted. The question now is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Finance as amended? Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you. May I inquire of the member from the Committee on Finance?
The senator from Finance is interrogated.
I just want to clarify with the local option tax, we are not giving select boards the ability to unilaterally pass a local option tax. We're simply removing the Dillon's rule requirement that once the people vote, we also have to approve it, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm also hoping to inquire about the section 14 that was removed from the bill, the Wealth Tax Commission report. Certainly, I understand JFO has a lot on their plate and can't do another report, but I wonder if the committee considered simply implementing a wealth tax, as I would agree, it does not need to be studied. It's been done in this country before.
Mr. President, the other body did do extensive work on that, and it's fairly complicated. I believe taxing unearned capital gains was one of the issues. It was hard to figure out how to do. No other state has initiated a wealth tax, and it would take, to do it correctly, we would have to have the ability to contract with, this had money in it for a facilitator, but not money to contract with the kind of national tax and economic experts that we'd have to do it correctly. And we just didn't have the resources.
I think the senator.
Question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Finance as amended? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it. You have amended the bill as offered by the Committee on Finance as amended. Question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered third reading of H 546. That now brings us to JRH 10. JRH 10 was on the notice calendar, I believe. Yep, and the action calendar. And please listen to the reading of the resolution. You can adopt it. Read it by title. Let's read it by title, shall we?
JRH 10, joint resolution authorizing the Green Mountain Girls State Educational Program to use the State House facilities on June 27, 2024.
Question is, shall the Senate adopt JRH 10 on its part? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it. You have adopted JRH 10. That completes the order of the day. Senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pending announcements, I would propose that we adjourn until tomorrow, Wednesday, April 24th at 1 p.m. And I'd like to follow it with the following. One, our pro tem is off being interviewed on Vermont Edition. And two, on this glorious spring day, we have two birthdays to celebrate. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to take a second to do it because they're important ones. Yesterday, we celebrated our own line of the Senate, our own Senator Sears of Bennington. We celebrated his birthday, and it's a challenge because there aren't really exciting judiciary things that happened. No famous golfers were born on this day, but a lot of important things actually happened on this day. It's the first Earth Day. In 1970, we celebrated the first Earth Day. And in 2016, of course, the Paris Accord was signed in New York City. And in 1964, the World's Fair opened in New York. And he shares a birthday with some important people. Oppenheimer, Robert Oppenheimer, who we were all reminded this summer and fall, was born in 1904. Charlie Mingus, our great musician, and of course, the revered and amusing Jack Nicholson was born in 1937. So we honor and celebrate you, Senator Sears, on your birthday. And today is our own puzzler, the puzzler of Chittenden North's birthday, Senator Irene Renner, who has the distinction of being born on the day that I believe William Shakespeare was born. We know he was christened on Friday. We're not fully certain he was born today, but the custom was 3 days later, and so we're giving it to you. We're giving it to you. In addition, today is also World Book Day, which seems perfect for a puzzler. And today in 1635, the first public school in the United States of America was founded, the Boston Latin School. The first game of baseball was played at the Wrigley Field in 1914. And in 2005, the first YouTube video titled "Me at the Zoo" aired and was published in this country. And you share this birthday today not only with William Shakespeare, but with William Penn, Shirley Temple, Halston, and Dev Patel, and sweet Prince Louis of Wales. Happy birthday to you both.
Are there a senator from Caledonia?
Thank you, Mr. President. Following that note, I would like to add that we're also celebrating this week Senator Clarkson's birthday. And in light of the celebrations and the fact that we have survived getting a budget passed out, I would like to invite all our colleagues, Senate colleagues, to a celebration in Senate Appropriations this afternoon at 1 o'clock or thereabouts. Last year, I made a raspberry trifle for Senator Sears. Unfortunately, we celebrated in absentia as he was not able to attend. So we're very happy that he's able to join us this year. So 1 o'clock or thereabouts in Senate Appropriations for raspberry trifle. Thank you.
Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. For very important reasons, we lost all of our committee time today, so I would ask the Committee on Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs to prepare to meet 8:30 the rest of the week and to look out for announcements about meeting at 8 a.m. for the rest of the week.
Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Health and Welfare will meet tomorrow morning at 8:30.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Finance will meet at 1:30.
Senator from Madison.
Senate Government Operations will also meet at 1:30.
Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Education will meet at 1:45.
Senator from Windsor.
Senate Democratic Caucus is going to be a little shorter today, but we have two important bills to get updated on. And so we're going to meet at 12:30 in the lounge. Thank you.
Senator from Madison.
Mr. President, Senate Natural Resources and Energy meet tomorrow morning, 9 a.m.
Senator from Bennington.
President, Senate Judiciary will meet at 9 a.m. tomorrow. While I'm on my feet, thank you very much for the birthday wishes. And I would add one person who was born on that day, given my hat today. That's Terry Francona, the coach of the first world champion Red Sox since 1918.
Are there any further announcements? With that, the senator from Windsor has moved that the Senate now stand adjourned until Wednesday, April 24th at 1 p.m. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and the Senate will stand adjourned until Wednesday, April 24th at 1 p.m.